What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 725. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, you got your hands on the new set?
Oh, yeah. I've been playing quite a bit and very much enjoying it. It's funny because I feel like the reviews of this set have been kind of mixed so far. Like the word on the street, you know, mostly like kind of looking at Twitter and talking to my friends. It's got a bit of the like, yeah, sometimes your opponent plays 3/1 drops because the best decks have like a ton of those that not everyone is in for. But I actually have been liking the set. It reminds me a little of Brothers War with a lot of trinkety artifacts and ways to use them. Craft I've been enjoying. Trying to crack the Descend and Caves puzzles, which I kind of have for Descend. I'm going to talk about that like as an archetype in the show. Caves yet to really figure out exactly what makes it tick. And maybe the answer is it doesn't. I'm not saying it, you know, it has to be good. But
right.
So far, this has been a lot of different kind of things to figure out. And, you know, we're still somewhat early in the format. And, yeah, I like a lot of what Lost Caverns has going on.
Yeah, me too. That's been my experience as well, as I've actually enjoyed it a fair bit. And mainly I haven't felt super pushed away from anything yet, right? And that feels good. It makes it feel, you know, like there's still room to explore and it's open and you know, we're still figuring out exactly what's good and what's not and how to draft these different archetypes. We're going to talk about that in our Lost Caverns of Ixalan format overview show today. We're going to talk about a couple of archetypes, the Descend deck that Luis mentioned and the Caves deck in depth. And we're also just going to talk about broad strokes. This is when we really kind of start to dive in to the numbers to see what's here and how it informs how we draft and what we think and how it matches up with our experience actually, you know, at the draft table as well.
And certainly going to touch on like kind of the Jeskai stuff too, because that is currently the best thing to be doing.
Okay, so we're going to talk about all that stuff on the show. Before we do, we got to mention our Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. And if you'd like to support us there, you can head on over. It's fully flexible. That's one of the things that we really like about Patreon is that you get to choose. You know, you can come, you can go, you can cancel, you can reinstate, you can change your amount, you can pick whatever amount you want. In fact, you can change it whenever you want. There's no commitments as far as that goes. And if you do sign up, you get a Limited Resources sticker and thank you card in the mail as our way of saying thanks. And that's regardless of the level that you sign up for. So thank you very much to everybody who supports us on Patreon. And the show's also brought to you by Ultimate Guard. That's right. The best supplies that you can get for your cards on the market come from Ultimate Guard. If you need sleeves, Luis and I talked about the katanas last week. In our opinion, those are the best ones that you can buy. They're awesome. If you've never tried out katana sleeves, you definitely should. They hit the perfect balance of durability, but feel also really amazing. You know, there's always there's some sleeves that are very durable, but they don't feel good in your hand. They don't go smoothly into each other when you're trying to shuffle them and stuff. And you kind of feel like you're giving up, you know, that comfort for the long game. And then there's some that are like, you know, really thin and smooth, but they wear out so quickly that you're like just constantly having to resleeve your deck. And katanas hit that perfect middle ground to give you that comfort and, you know, they're smooth, but also they last you for a good long time. And that's just one of the products you can get from Ultimate Guard. They've got deck boxes for all of your needs, whether it's for your limited stuff, for Commander, for your constructed decks, for holding multiple decks, for holding all your cards at home, backpacks, all that kind of stuff from Ultimate Guard. We want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard for sponsoring the show. We really do appreciate it. Luis, let's do a couple of crack-a-packs to just kind of knock the ice off here and we can get into what we've been feeling about the format. So the first crack-a-pack comes up and we've got a Hidden Courtyard, which is the white cave.
The caves have been fine, like in normal decks. The presence of both caves and land cyclers has made me prioritize neither. I like the caves a little bit more, but if your deck's full of 1-drops, then the caves start to become worse, both because they conflict with playing a 1-drop on turn 1 and because you discover into 1-drops when you sack your cave.
Oh, sure.
But in terms of flood protection and screw protection, having 2 caves in your deck or 2 land cyclers or 1 of each is not like a huge difference. So I don't really pick these very highly.
Okay, because you know that you can get them when you want them.
Yeah, I just don't need to take these over something else that's less replaceable because the caves are fairly replaceable.
Next is Tithing Blade, which is the 1 and a black artifact, and when it ETBs, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and then you can craft with the creature for 4 and a black, and it becomes an artifact that drains them for 1 on your upkeep.
Yeah, it's a good card. The way the crafting stuff has played out, the craft ability is almost like another free card on top of a card, which this card is totally playable. Mm-hmm. In general, 2 mana sorcery speed, they sack a creature has not been quite up to snuff. But add in the fact that it's an artifact in play for you to like sacrifice to whatever effect you want, or something you can craft later and turn into like an actual, like the Sepulchre is an actual threat. Draining 1 a turn is real. Mm-hmm. Like I have lost to this card. I stabilize at 6 life against an aggro deck, and they just flip that.
Yeah.
And the combination makes a card that I'm pretty happy with. I would put this card in my deck. Plus, it's a permanent for Descend, which is always nice too.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Tithing Blade. And I did wonder, because I try not to look too much at the numbers on 17 lands before we get to this point in the show. I did look at a couple of things, but I hadn't looked this one up. And it is the best black common, but interestingly, which I wouldn't have guessed necessarily, black was the worst color by a fair bit. So it's the best of the worst. But yeah, I think for all the reasons you said, it has been performing pretty well. Same casting cost as Deathcap Marionette. That's the 1 and a black 1/1 Death Touch. And when it ETBs, you may mill too.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. This is actually one of the really important cards for the Descend decks, because not only does it give you exactly what you want, which is an early blocker, it also mills you too. So it kind of protects you and gets your engine going at the same time. To be clear, I wouldn't really want to first pick this card or a black card in general. I'm not out here saying that I love drafting this Descend deck so much that I always draft it. It's just one of the decks I have been able to draft. And part of the reason that black is so bad, as we talk about like where the colors kind of slide in against each other, black is in the dumpster. All these aggressive 1-drops are really good against 2 and 3 mana and 4 mana removal spells. So like black's traditionally best cards, like 3 mana kill any creature at instant speed is generally a high pick. It just doesn't line up well when your opponent's average cast is like 1.5 in terms of mana for the creatures they play in the first 5 turns of the game.
Right. Yeah, and that does mean that Deathcap Marionette might be something you're a little more interested in, just because it can trade for something that costs 1 or 2 mana or even 5. But as you mentioned, it mills you for 2, and then when it does die, you get a permanent in your yard. So it is a very Descend-friendly card. Next is Family Reunion, which is 1 and a white for an instant. Choose one target. Creatures you control get +1/+1, or creatures you control gain hexproof. I have not played with this card, and I think I played against it once, and it was mediocre.
Yeah, it is not a card that I have prioritized putting in my deck, and I don't think I've even seen someone cast it against me.
Yeah, not a great one. Burning Sun Cavalry is 1 in a red 2/2, and whenever it attacks or blocks while you control a dinosaur, it gets +1/+1.
It's like the sort of thing that I would generally like this card. A 2 mana 2/2 that can be a 3/3 in the right deck is pretty good. The biggest knock against this is you don't really want to be red-green. Like, if you draft red-green, you draft red-green, and it's fine. But I don't think the Dinos deck is one that I'm really going to want to commit to early. Like, if you get a third pick, it's Quith, right? The red-green uncommon. Great. The lane's open. Go for it. But all else being equal, I don't think you should take a red card that's like, it's kind of like red-green shaded. Like, it's red, but it's like really kind of like red half of green.
Right.
Because you can play this in non-green decks, just won't be as good.
Yeah, what I've seen from it most commonly is that it sits on the battlefield as a 2/2 for 2, and then every once in a while it gets the bump. But it's not. I have not seen the decks that are dedicated enough to just make this basically a 3/3 for 2 mana. It's just an occasional bump, and that's okay. That people do play
that's fine.
2-drops. Yeah, it's all right. It doesn't need to be a 3/3 to be good. Next is Brazen Blade Master. This is the 2 in a red 2/3. And when it attacks while you control 2 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+1 until end of turn. I have not seen this be part of an equation that I was impressed with yet.
Oh, I think it's fine. I think mostly the multicolor, or like not multicolor, the aggressive artifact decks don't have a lot of room for cards like this. I mean, this is kind of what we talked about in the set review, where like your non-artifact slots in your artifact decks are just pretty contested, and this isn't really the first choice of where to use those. So yeah, it's a fine card to play in your artifact decks, but you just don't really need to play it that often. So it's not something I would prioritize picking early.
Yeah. Arazka Puzzle Door is blue for an artifact, and you can pay 1, tap it, and sack it to look at the top 2 cards of your library. One of them goes in your hand, and the other one goes in your graveyard. You've been playing this a lot in your Descent deck?
It's okay. It's actually, I like it more in the like blue-white artifacts deck, or, especially if you have some Oaken Sirens, where basically it makes it so you're not paying very much of a cost at all.
Right.
But it is the sort of thing that you can play in the Descent deck because it's both a permanent and gets you a bunch of Descent. So yeah, it is fine there. Again, not a card I'm taking early, but definitely something I am interested in once I have this framework, whether that be Oaken Sirens in like a blue-white artifact themed deck or blue-red artifact themed deck, or a blue-black Descent deck that needs a little bit more ways to get going. I'd still rather use Deathcap Marionette, or the Waterlogged Hulk actually works out kind of nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Puzzle Door is the type of card that is just enough of a pivot card, hitting enough different things that we'll just see it for the duration of the format. It holds its own. It's cheap. It's replaceable. It's on an installment plan to get your card back, or you can just pay 2 straight up. And it's basically never bad, right? It's very hard for this card to just be terrible. But doesn't exactly have a super high ceiling either. Next is Panicked Altasaur. This is the 4 and a red 4/5 reach, and you can tap it to do 2 damage to an opponent.
I'm not super interested in this.
Yeah. It's just it is exactly what we said in the set review. It is perfectly fine. The text on it is good. It is what, it checks all the boxes, but it's just not a contested slot. At the 5 mana dinosaur slot is like, you're going to get some really good stuff in that deck. Next is Echo of Dusk. That's the 1 and a black 2/2 with Descend 4. It gets +1/+1 and lifelink. Is this a Descend payoff you're interested in?
It actually is. So the reason I like the Echo of Dusk is you can play it on turn 2 and it can, attack and block just fine. If you're good at descending, this is on fairly early. And instead of trying to kill their 1/1 flyers with removal, especially, like Miner's Guidewing just gives you a trigger at that point. Like, instead of doing that, just play a 3/3 lifelinker. And then your 3/3 lifelinker kind of races their multiple of their other things.
Yeah, once you get it to that, it's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also is nice because of the play pattern where, you play it, it does its thing, and then the turn when you turn it on, it usually can attack right away, right?
Yeah, I mean, it generally does. So
yeah, I like it. I still view it as filler, even in that deck. Like I'm like, oh, thank God I got an Echo of Dusk. It's still just like, okay, sure, but nah, you could do worse. Basking Capybara is 1 and a green for a 1/3 with Descend 4. It gets +3/+0.
Yeah, I'm not interested in drafting a green-black Descend deck pretty much. And so this card doesn't really have a home.
Exactly. This is a type of card that looks like it wants to go in the Dinos deck, like a 2-drop that has the potential for, big power out of your 2, and it just doesn't fit there in any way. It's not a dinosaur, and it cares about things the dinosaurs don't. So it's probably going to be lost in the woods for most of the set, I would think. Next is an interesting one that we have on our cards to talk about list, so we could do it here if you'd like. It's Petrify.
Yeah, this has been a solid removal spell.
Why, though? It has for me, too. But it feels like it wouldn't fit in this set, doesn't it?
I think it's a lot of it is the speed. I just think that yes, you can petrify something and then they can use it to craft later or whatever. But most of the time,
not if they're dead.
Just attack a lot. And the other thing is it's cheap enough that it gets hit by Discover. So anytime you're discovering, it's just a removal spell. You can hit off that. Like I've had that happen with like the Capriati Sunborn or Capricati Sunborn, the 4/4 thing, or Italia's Favor, another card which has certainly done a lot better than it initially looked, at least to us.
Yeah. We'll talk about that one too, especially if we open one, but we have it on our list as well. Yeah, but Petrify's been good. Like it feels, pacifism's back, baby. Next is Abyssal Gore Stalker. That's the 4 black 6/6, and when it ETBs, both players sack 2 creatures.
I like what this does in theory, but I haven't really found it to be something that works very well. It's too hard to set up where you need to not only have them have basically exactly 2 creatures in play, or at least have their 2 weakest creatures not be that terrible, and you want like 2 other creatures in play to sack to it. It's just kind of Look, there's some boards where this is like unbelievable. You cast this, you sack 2 fungus, they sack 2 6/6s, and you're just like, wow, it's the best card in the world.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's like, well, this is a 6-mana spell. Can't always even cast those. And then when I do, it has to have like all these conditions go right. So not something I'm like
I've tried.
super into.
I've tried, and the way you described it is exactly how it plays out. They always have one extra card so they get to keep their bomb, and it's just like, okay, no. And then sometimes also you set it up so that they have 2 really good creatures and you have like a junker, and then you play this so you get both of them, but you're like, well, I just lost my guy too. Like it feels like you got them, but then when your Abyssal Gorestalker goes to the yard, you're like, actually, I didn't really get them that bad. Next is Helping Hand. That's the white sorcery. We're in the uncommons now, by the way. The Gorestalker is an uncommon as well. Return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped.
I like this card. I mean, you want to have a curve where you have a lot of targets overall and a fair amount of targets that cost 3 or like exactly 3, because that's where like the real money is, right? Returning a 3-drop with it. And I've had it be pretty good. Like most white decks will just gladly slot this in. So it's not a card I'm unhappy to take early.
Yeah, totally fine. Next is Ixali's Lore Keeper. This is the green 1/1, and it taps to add 1 mana of any color, but you can spend this mana only on dinosaur stuff.
I do think this is a real payoff for being a dinosaur deck. I just haven't generally liked how those decks have come together. They feel like they feel like they're just a little slow against the like white 1-drop flyers, and they don't line up that great against like black removal spells. But
so you actually want to be in dinos if you have an Ixali's Lore Keeper, because that does shore that problem up quite nicely.
Yes. I mean, it is true though. Like that is part of what I'm looking for. This is one of the reasons to do this thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of 1-drops in the set, and when you see one hit, it's like, okay, I got to sit up straight. I got to make sure I, play tight here. This could be a close one. When Ixali's Lore Keeper hits on turn 1, it's like, oh no, because dinosaurs are like their main characteristic is just being big, and so the earlier you get them down, the better they are at punching through your stuff. Fight spells get better, etc. Our rare is Get Lost. It's 1 and a white for an instant, destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker, and its controller gets a map token.
It's 2 map tokens, but
is it 2? Sorry, 2 map tokens. Yeah.
I partially know that because this is actually one of the best cards for Vintage Cube from the new set.
Oh.
So I've actually played against the card a bunch. The card is very good. I mean, it kills anything, and it gives them, it gives them real value, but not anything, that you can't necessarily bear to give them. So I think that Get Lost is pretty cool. It's actually better in Vintage Cube than it is in Limited, because map tokens, I think, are a little harder to use. But Get Lost is good. I don't mind that card.
Okay. So what do you narrow it down to? Like cards that catch my eye here?
I just looked at the stats out of curiosity. It's horrendous stats.
It is a lot of value.
I guess giving them a map token or 2 map tokens in Limited is actually just too much of a beat. Yeah,
I mean this type of removal always tends to suck it up, and map tokens have actually proven to be really good.
Yeah, but map tokens are quite strong.
Yeah, like you said though, in Vintage Cube, the thing you're killing with Get Lost is like the way that they're winning the game, and that they probably sunk about a bunch of resources into, and then you give them map tokens, which are kind of awkward to use in some decks. But anyway, what are the cards that stand out? I like Petrify, Ixali's Lore Keeper. I mean, I'm not taking Tithing Blade or Deathcat Marionette here. I'm not taking any of the black cards.
You just take Petrify.
Yeah. I might take Lore Keeper and just try to go for upside. It's obviously way riskier. You have to be basically green-red, and you have to be dinosaurs to make that card actually really good.
Actually right now, like if this was in the Arena Open at this point in time, although I'll have many more drops by then. Right now, I'd take Petrify if all I wanted to do was win. I do think right now, if I was just drafting on Arena, I would probably take the Lore Keeper and just try to see what does my draft look like when I first pick a Lore Keeper. Like how does that play out?
Because I think the real question with Lore Keeper, we know that it's great if you're green-red dinos, but what if you're green something else with some number of dinos, right? Like you have some green dinos, and then your off color has like 1 extra dinosaur in there. So you've got 7 things you can help power out with the Lore Keeper. Then is it good enough? Inclination is no. right? I think I'd want like the majority of my creatures or whatever to be able to be castable, but might be worth finding out. Okay, let's do another crack-a-pack. Why can't we just open up our preview card? Like that's the one we want. Our cave is the red cave hidden volcano. Next card is inverted iceberg. This one's seen a ton of play as well. It's 1 and a blue artifact. When it ETBs, you mill a card and draw a card. And then you can craft with an artifact for blue, and it becomes, what is it, a 4/6 or something? I can't remember its stats. But
it becomes a 6/6 that when it attacks, it taps or untaps any artifact or creature.
Yeah.
I love inverted iceberg. It's like the perfect enabler because it mills you for 1, so you're able to fill your graveyard for things to craft. It draws you a card, so it smooths out your draw, puts an artifact into play that you can use any way you want, and is also your win condition. It's a 6-mana thing.
Yeah.
I just find this card to be very good in all the artifact-based blue decks, which is not all the blue decks, but a lot of them.
Yeah.
And even in the like Descend deck, this card's actually good too, because you just end up, you like self-mill, and you will mill some of your artifacts eventually.
Yeah, craft has been really strong. A good shortcut to read it would be something like Flashback, where you just get to do something expensive later with the card. There was a big question during the set review about how we would be setting up these craft cards and how often we'd be able to actually pay the thing and transform them. But the ones that turn into creatures, particularly where like you get board presence out of it right away, and it has not been difficult to find like ways to craft. Like craft with an artifact is like trivially easy, right? Like in a blue-based deck, you're going to have that basically every single time from a map token or an artifact on board or something that went in the graveyard. So that part of the cost I haven't really been paying as much attention to as just the mana cost, because that's the thing that actually seems to matter. And Iceberg's great. Next is Burning Sun Cavalry. This is the 1 and a red 2/2 and gets the dinosaur bump. So we already talked about him. Next is Greedy Freebooter. Very much an enabler type card. It's the black 1/1, and when it dies, you get a treasure and scry 1. Sort of born to be sacrificed.
I haven't really found there to be like a sacrifice deck. So this card, I think you can play. My favorite Descend deck I've had so far had a Bringer of the Last Gift in it, the 8 mana 6/6 flying that when you cast it, cast Living Death.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And so in order to like enable that, I was playing like Greedy Freebooter and stuff that like, I just want to chump and then get a treasure and then, do that whole thing.
Uh-huh.
And that was sick. That deck was really sweet. In general, though, I found Greedy Freebooter to not quite be good enough.
Yeah, I had it in a black-white sacrifice deck. I had 2 of them, and I had 2 of the 1/4s, and then I had the uncommon, maybe it's a rare, whatever. I had not the one that's just sacrifice, get a counter, but the one that like when you explore, it gets bigger and it has ward, pay 3 life. I had that guy. When you gain life, it explores and then blah, blah, blah. And so cards like Freebooter and that were welcome additions to that. But even then they felt a little bit narrow. I agree. I don't think this is just a throw it into any deck type card. You got to kind of have a reason. Next is Song of Stupefaction, which is the 1 and a blue aura that enchants a creature or vehicle. It mills 2 when it ETBs, and it has Fathomless Descent, and the thing gets -X/-0, where X is your descent number.
Yeah, I think you can play this in a dedicated Descend deck, but it's pretty poor outside of that. It's not like my ideal card inside of that, so I'm not really like trying to prioritize this card.
Yeah, sorcery speed doesn't actually kill the thing, blah, blah, blah. Next is Fanatical Offering. This is the 1 and a black instant. It is additional cost to cast it. You sack an artifact or creature. You draw 2 cards and get a map. I've liked this. I think I'm too high on black. Like looking at what everybody else is doing, I've had reasonable success with it. So, I'll kind of have to let it even itself out. But, I play Fanatical Offering pretty regularly.
Yeah, I do think it's justifiable to put in your deck for sure.
Yeah. Next is Poison Dart Frog. This is the 1 and a green 1/1 with reach. It taps add 1 mana of any color, and you can pay 2 to give it Death Touch. Where are you at on the PDF? As it were?
I do think it's good. Like, I think that this is the kind of card you do want in your like green ramp decks or even just in any green deck that's trying to like be a mid-range deck. You don't have to be even dedicated ramp. It kind of does the fixing thing, does the ramping thing, and also can trade up for like a really big creature in like the middle or late game.
Yeah.
So I lost badly to a Caves deck that had a bunch of these.
Yeah.
And we're just like ramping out big things.
Like you said, for the jobs that it has, it just checks all those boxes. It doesn't excel at any of them, but it's like, yep, it does all those things. And those are valuable things in a game. I like it too. Next is Unlucky Drop. This is the 3 and a blue instant target artifact or creature's owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library.
This card has really overperformed.
Oh yeah? What do you like about it?
I think that blue is already a good color in this set and has a good low curve. So having a 4-mana spell on the top of the curve that can get anything off the board for at least a turn, that's just enough. Like I think this is a card that I don't believe this card is making blue good, but I believe because blue is good, it is carrying the win rate of this card fairly high.
I think so too. I mean, this counts as a removal spell, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. You get a 4-mana instant speed removal spell from blue. If blue isn't very good, then you start to nitpick the fact that it's 4 mana, doesn't permanently kill the thing, etc. But if blue's good, this thing gets something out of the way and is close enough to a removal spell to drag it up, with the other cards. Next is Daring Discovery. This is the 4 and a red sorcery. Up to 3 target creatures can't block this turn, and you discover 4. This one doesn't really fit. People are playing these really low curve decks, and if your Discover 4 hits a 1 or a 2 drop, you're kind of bummed out about it.
Yeah, I don't think this one is particularly good.
Another Echo of Dusk here. Then there's a Glorifier of Suffering. This is the 2 and a white 3/2, and when it ETBs, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. This thing actually has a pretty gnarly effect on the board the turn it comes down. I think this generally good. Is it? Yeah, I've shied away from playing it myself too much, but when people play it and pay, it's like, oh man, like that's a lot. Like I'm either getting smashed right now or they have this plus something bigger. I don't know. It might be pretty good.
Yeah, I think that part of what's making this card so good is there's multiple really good 1-drops, and especially in white, you have both common and uncommon 1-drop flyers, the Miner's Guidewing, and then the bat, the lifelink 1 white for a 1/1 lifelink flyer that scries. And as a result, Glorifier of Suffering just makes those into bigger threats in the air, and that's good enough. Plus, kind of like we found with a bargain, there's a lot of trinkets waiting to be fed this thing. Like, that's true. There's a lot of ways to get a treasure, to get a map, to get a whatever, or just feed one of your, like Tinker's Toad, of course, is like the best at this. It just always gives you something good to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the thing about this type of card is if you have to sacrifice actual board presence in the form of your attacking creatures, then they tend to suffer. But if you can throw anything else to it, you are building out your board while building out your board. Like it adds a lot for a 3-drop. First uncommon is Curator of Sun's Creation. This is the 3 and a red 3/3. And whenever you discover again for the same value, it only triggers once. I have not found this to be enough. I mean, there's obviously combos here. Atali's Favor is a card. We're going to talk about it a bit, but I haven't been able to make it work.
I mean, I lost really badly to this card once out of like a red-green deck that just, I didn't have removal. I was like white-blue, and they played it and just got, 3 extra discovers, and I was dead after the first 2, but, the game continued. So yeah, it can definitely happen.
I guess you just have to get critical mass.
Yeah,
of discover cards in your deck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think you need necessarily like 20 discover cards. You don't need like 9. You need like 5. And if you have 2 caves and you have a couple, like maybe you got lucky and you got the geothermal engineer or whatever, the 2 red 3/2
geologist guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you just like play a couple, then you try to pick up like an Atali's Favor or 2, and then yeah, you're there basically. You didn't overpay by so much for the original that I don't mind doing it.
Would you take a Daring Discovery that was probably going to be in your sideboard and put it in if you had a Curator of Sun's Creation?
That is a good combo. But Daring
two Discover 4s is a lot.
If your deck's aggressive enough that you think you could use Daring Discovery okay in some of the other games, then yeah. If it's not though, then you like if you wouldn't want to draw Daring Discovery without drawing the Curator, then I would not put it in my deck. Otherwise, I think I would be. It's kind of gifted over the line there.
Yeah, because there's two schools of thought for where you can pivot on red, right? There's like red, white, aggressive that wouldn't mind the Daring Discover ability because a lot of times their early creatures do get outclassed in the mid to late game. But then there's like red, green dinos where the whole point of the deck is you don't have to play cards like Daring Discovery because they don't have good blocks anyway. Like your stuff's just bigger and your combat tricks. Next uncommon is Volatile Fault, which is a cave that taps for colorless. You can pay 1 tap and sacrifice it to destroy a non-basic land an opponent controls. That player searches their library for a basic land and puts it on the battlefield, and you get a treasure. It's just cave filler is all I've seen.
You play this if you're playing caves. You do not play it otherwise, basically.
Right. And there's some number of colorless producing caves that you can play, and this is fine to be one of them. Last uncommon is Tendril of the Myco Tyrant. This is 1 and a green for a 2/2, and it has activated ability 5 green to put 7+1/+1 counters on target creature, target non-creature land you control. It becomes a 0/0 fungus with haste, and it's still a land. We didn't really like this during the set review, and I feel like there's still just better places to be putting your mana. But it's just 7's a lot.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Like, it's not the worst card to kind of cap off your green decks with, but it's not a high priority. It is a playable card though.
Is it? Yeah, I always just would rather, like if it was a dinosaur, if it just had like a little bit more synergy with something, but it just sits there as literally 2 mana 2/2. And in, current era limited, that's a tough pill to swallow. Speaking of dinosaurs, our rare is a mythic. It is Gishath Sun's Avatar. That's the 5 red, green, white. So 8 mana, 7/6 vigilance, trample, haste. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you reveal that many cards from the top of your library, and you get to just put that many dinosaurs from among them onto the battlefield.
I mean, a fun card, but not a very good one. You shouldn't put this in your deck.
I did get turn 5, I think, by this. I can't remember. My opponent played turn 3, the 3 mana artifact that ramps you, look at the top 6 and get a land. And then they did it again the next turn. And I'm like, yeah, this is fine. And I got to play a freaking Planeswalker Unlimited. I played the elephant guy, made a 3/2. I'm like, I am good to go. My opponent goes, play this. I'm like, oh no. They killed my Planeswalker immediately and then killed me the next turn with stupid Gishath. But I'm with you. I mean, I don't know how many, whatever that acolyte thing is called, and poison dart frogs and the ramp spell, like,
right.
Could you do it? Like if you were in green red straight up, would you? If you're in green red, ramp dinos. It's the only home for it. Yeah,
I certainly would try it. I don't know that. I don't know that it's. I don't know that it's generally good enough, but I'm not closed off to the idea that this card could be pretty good. Like I do think that's a totally reasonable, place this could lead. Do I think that you should take this card in any way early? And no, of course not.
Okay. Well, there you go. Wait, so what are we taking out of this pack?
Nothing.
Yeah, it wasn't really great, was it?
No.
Maybe.
I mean, I think that the best card to take is probably the unlucky. No, I just take Inverted Iceberg.
Inverted Iceberg, maybe? Yeah. I think the cards that catch my eye are Inverted Iceberg, Poison Dart Frog, sure, Unlucky Drop, and then I guess Gishath or whatever would, I would consider it just because like I'm taking a mediocre common here. And if I do want to try it out, or if I do think that the best version of dinosaurs involves heavy ramp, then, sure, give me the sick payoff. But
yeah, you probably shouldn't.
Pretty bad packs. Yeah, really rough. Let's talk really big picture here before we go into archetype, or before we go into specific archetypes. The first thing to note is that if you look at the colors in broad strokes, it becomes clear very quickly that both white and blue represent the top colors. Coming into this episode before having really looked at the numbers on 17 lands, my impression was that blue was the best, followed by white. It turns out they're basically tied. I looked at the power ranges of the top 5 commons for each one, and they're very similar. Blue does edge it out a little bit at the top end and at the bottom end of that. So that's fine. And then if you look at red and green, they're also very, very similar. They look almost identical as far as their power ranges. Again, power range meaning the top 5 commons for each color and what the best one is to the worst one of those 5. And then there's a big drop off. Black is very much bringing up the back of the pack, but it is worth noting that it is not that far behind. It is not, we have had a few sets not too long ago where there was a color that was not just the worst, but it was like way, way, way the worst. This is in the middle. There is a significant delineation. If you want to think of it in terms of just like how's the best common performing for each of these, 60%ish for white and blue, 58%ish for red and green, black 56%ish, right? It is a significant chunk back down, but it's worth noting that the worst of those 5 is 54.8, which puts it at like dead average for 17 lands users, not even below average. So we actually have, of course, there's going to be some colors that are better than others. In this case, it's blue and white, followed by red and green, and then followed by black. It's not that big of a gap though. Like this is totally acceptable. This is the type of thing where, we will, if it stays like this, we will say you can draft any colors. Like this is not black's off the menu.
I agree with that. I do think the Just Guy colors are clearly the best. And if you have the opportunity to be in basically any 2 of them, you're pretty happy. But I agree that black is not, and green, black and green really aren't so far back that they're not draftable.
Right. I looked at the top 10 commons, and 8 of the 10 are blue or white. So, pretty dominant color pair at the top there. But again, I went through again, this is week 1 and these things usually do change, but I wanted to get a snapshot for what the archetypes themselves were doing. And you see similar groupings. Blue, red, and blue, white are the best archetype. They're tied. And then red, white, and green, red are tied for the second best archetype. So I thought that was kind of interesting. You've got, blue, white, which is like mainly an artifacts flyers deck. And then you've got blue, red, which can definitely be quite assertive if it goes for artifact sub theme. Red, white, which is aggressive. And then green, red, which is dinosaurs, which can lead aggressive. It depends. And then the only other color pair that was kind of hanging on to that top tier was green, white. So I don't really know exactly what green, white's archetype is, but it's hanging around up there. Then there's a large gap to the rest. And it trails from green, blue down to the worst, which is actually kind of refreshing because this color pair seems to have really been great for multiple sets in a row, which is black, red.
Yeah, finally, black, red.
Yeah.
Basically, again, it kind of goes back to my theory that removal's not the best in this set, just like in terms of how it's positioned. It's not even that the removal spells are particularly bad. So you end up in a spot where the removal color pair, black, red, just isn't performing as well because killing their stuff is just not that good of a strategy.
Right. I mean, you mentioned it before. The aggressive decks are very, very low to the ground where individual removal spells tend to not perform well against that type of archetype. And then we also have things like craft, like things where you can play something early, get something reasonable out of it, and then turn that mana later on into something powerful. If you're sitting there trying to 1-for-1 against people who, even just take like the iceberg or whatever, like those type of cards, that's a 2-for-1. Like it's hard to beat those with just removal spells on a 1-for-1 basis. So it makes sense. One thing I do want to note here, Luis, as well, is the total range from the top decks down to that black, red deck at the bottom is also still reasonably compact. The best 2 decks are winning right now at a 59.5% clip. And the black, red deck at the bottom is 53.1. Now, 53.1 is a big gap up to blue, red, and blue, white, but remember, 54 to 55 is the average for these decks. This is only about 1% below average. We've had this where we looked at this early on and it was like 49% or something, where it's like way like don't touch it, type of deck. And that isn't the case here. So it reflects what we saw from the colors and that things are reasonably compact.
Yeah, you can draft and play just about any color combination or pair and have a reasonable chance of success, which is nice. I think that's generally an upside. What about
you mentioned a few minutes ago about these cheap aggro cards, especially in the Jeskai decks?
So basically the Jeskai decks, there's 3 color pairs, right? There's blue-red, blue-white, and red-white. Blue-red and blue-white are a bit more artifact themed, where you're going to want cards like Oaken Siren really go a long way. You can use, Master's Guide Mural as a finisher. You can really just count on having a bunch of artifacts in play so that you can kind of get all those artifact synergies to work. While also having, if you're with red, the aggressive like Tomb Raider starts. Captain Storm, the blue-green gold or blue-red gold card is fantastic. Put a +1 count on a pirate whenever you play an artifact or an artifact comes into play. And overall, I think that the artifact strategies are pretty good, and they're pretty, there's some things to figure out there, but we're not going to do a deep dive on those, at least in this episode, just because most of what these 3 color pairs are doing is just taking as many cheap cards as possible. And by doing so, you end up in a spot where you just get to make more plays than your opponent, and there's not much they can do about it. Like, it's hard to catch up when you're behind when someone's curving out with these things. The red-white deck is a little bit different. It still has potentially an artifact theme, right? It can still play the Sunshot Militia plus Tinker's Tote is actually a pretty good combination, like the 1/3 that you tap 2 artifacts to ping them for 1 or 2 creatures to ping them for 1. But red-white can also just have a curve of 1 drops into 2 drops with some removal spells, Smatali's Favors, and other ways to pump Deconstruction Hammer. Just basically the name of the game is getting your 1/1 flyer up to doing 2 or 3 points of damage a turn, and then you usually win pretty easily.
Yeah, the map tokens have done a really good job with that. We've seen that map tokens on flyers is just something that's going to be here for the whole format. And anytime you can upgrade one of the commons or even uncommons, by 1 power, if it has flying, usually takes it from a card that you're reasonably happy with to one that like must be dealt with. There's a big difference there. And if it's a map token, you don't really give up anything for doing that.
Yeah. And so basically, if any 2 of these 3 colors are open, just draft a really low curve and your deck will tend to be pretty good. We'll get into deeper on those, but those are kind of like the level 1 strategy of the format. And a lot of people have figured out kind of that's the place you want to be.
Yeah. Do you think that these type of strategies tend to do well early in a format because people are still sorting out what's good of the slower, clunkier, synergistic stuff?
There is some element to that. I do think this is still going to be true that these strategies are going to be among the best ones, but I don't think that it's necessarily going to be at the level it is right now, especially since it does seem like a lot of these strategies and then these cards, I could easily see people figuring out how to make Descent work or how to make some of these slightly slower decks work in a way that can kind of cut in on the win rate of these cards. I just do think these are still going to be the best thing to be doing. I think that it's not like it's not like people are missing some big obvious thing. I think as people refine the maybe slower decks to try to fight against these decks, that maybe the win percentages change a little bit. But I think in general, removal spells line up badly against 1-drops, line up badly against cards that discover or make map tokens. They line up badly if your opponent just has played 4 spells by the time you're getting around to play your removal spell.
And that's going to be true.
Yeah, and it's not like the artifact decks are the most trivial to figure out. Figuring out how to mix Oaken Sirens and Inverted Icebergs and which of the, how many Erazka puzzle doors do you want? Do you want to play Otakon Landmark? All that kind of stuff, is kind of close.
Yeah, I think I tell me if this checks out, because the way I'm thinking about it is more like it's early in the format and everybody's trying everything. If you do a more close to the ground, exactly what it's going to do. It's going to be consistent. It's going to put out power and toughness on the board early and often type strategy. if somebody plays, let's just say each person that drafts is just drafting the seat that's sort of open for them, but we don't know what's good and what's not good, right?
Right.
So yes, people are tweaking archetypes, but let's just say they're drafting good versions of all the archetypes right now. What that means is like some people are drafting blue-white artifacts or flyers, and it's like, oh, I'm winning a lot with this, and maybe they beat that style of deck, or maybe they are that style of deck. But then there's also people that are like, I'm going to draft the caves deck, like me, and it hasn't performed well. More on that later. But if that's the case, even if I have a quote good cave deck, I'm going to get beaten up by this, and there may not be any tweaking I can do within the archetype. So eventually, people will just abandon the archetype, and now I have a much better idea of what I'm apt to face, and I have a much better idea of what I don't want to be drafting, because we're still in week 1 or whatever the format. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I
just that like you can take it in broad strokes against the format while people are not just figuring out the individual archetype, but just still drafting all of the archetypes, many of which we will not be.
Yeah, I think there is a learning curve to some of this stuff, but overall, I do think that the one
it's just a good strategy,
and the aggro strategy is just still going to be very good.
Okay. You and I as well have both been toying around with Descend, primarily blue-black. Why don't you tell us about what you've learned from that?
So the blue-black Descend deck is kind of a control deck, but one of the things that you want to watch out for is you actually don't want to be playing a bunch of removal spells in general. I'm not saying you should play 0 removal spells, but what this deck is basically trying to do is self-mill with a bunch of different things, fill its graveyard, and make all the Descend cards be on, of which there are some pretty good payoffs. The kind of particulars are you want to bias heavily towards permanence. So another reason not to play a bunch of removal spells is every removal spell you put in your deck is 1 fewer permanent, because you're going to be in a situation where you're like, I need this Deathcap Marionette to mill 2 permanents so that my Echo can attack. And if that's not the case, then I'm going to end up in a lot of trouble.
Right. You are trying to turbo Descend 4, basically.
Yeah, you're trying to kind of make it the least likely that you will get a whiff.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you do that, you have a variety of cards which are just more powerful than before, and you get to kind of like this reminds me a little of Spider Spawning when you have, like, let's say 2 copies of Another Chance, the mill 2 and then raise dead 2 creatures. If you have a good creature in your deck, then you often be able to find it because you'll mill it and then you'll cast one of these. Now, you don't get to always have one of these, but you want a couple, because one of the things this deck does is actually play more than 40 cards. And the reason it does that is you want to be able to mill yourself every time you play a self-mill card. They're actually almost all optional now, just to make them play better. But you do want to be in a spot where you can just mill 10, 15 cards, 20 cards without really costing yourself. And
yeah,
if you're playing 40 cards, you might deck yourself. So sometimes you want to play like 50 cards or 47 cards or whatever, and keep the mana ratio about the same.
And the permanence ratio the same as well.
Yeah, as much as you can, basically.
That's the hard part I found is just trying to make sure that you're always tracking that you've got enough of them. Even if you increase your library size, you can't just add a bunch of sorceries to make your library bigger.
Yeah.
That does not accomplish your goal.
And you end up wanting to have the early game be playing Deathcap Marionette and River Herald Scout, just like little creatures that are giving you value. They both can mill you. River Herald Scout can also find you lands. Echo of Dusk is really good for this. And the other thing, and then Inverted Iceberg I found to be decent because you have other artifacts in your deck. So this is kind of like you could end up getting a 6/6 out of the deal, plus it mills you a little, same with like Puzzlegate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you really do want like multiple copies of Another Chance, especially if you're playing like a full dedicated deck that's like 50 cards. Having 2 to 3 Another Chances is actually pretty good in the deck. But you have to have the cheap cards to make that work.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask. Are you trying to Another Chance back your finishers, or are you trying to Another Chance back your little mill value guys?
You're trying to Another Chance back your finishers, unless you need the mill value guys, in which case maybe you do that first time.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes, those type of cards that are a little clunky, right? 3 mana to get back creature to, but if you can get back a small, like a Marionette, you can cast it that turn if it's mid to late game. But obviously, if you can get your bomb back, you can close out the game. So maybe one of each is ideal.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you have enough self-milling. So, you have the commons I mentioned. Waterlogged Hulk is a really good uncommon for this. It's a 1 blue mana. You just tap it to mill 1, and then eventually you can craft it with an island into a 4/4 vehicle. It just does it for free. And like games where you start with that on turn 1, you end up getting up to Descend really quickly. Mm-hmm. And there's some pretty strong Descend cards. There's like Council of Echoes, an uncommon, the 6 mana 4/4 that bounces. Mm-hmm. Chupacabra Echo is just fantastic in this deck. And there are some pretty good rares that are reasons to go into this deck. So I am not saying you should start from pick 1, like going into this deck instead of going one of the Jeskai decks. I don't think that's a good idea. But there's cards like Souls of the Lost. It's like, it's going to be a 2 mana 7/8 a lot of the time, or bigger. I've had that card be up to like a 14/15. Throne of the Grim Captain, a huge enabler payoff. Both Terror Tide, the Wrath for
which one is Throne?
2 mana artifact, tap, mill 2, and then you have to craft it with a pirate, a dinosaur, a vampire, and a merfolk, and it turns into an unbeatable thing. So, it's an actual real payoff for this.
Yeah, remember when we were talking about it, and I was like, "But can you actually do this?" And you're like, "Yeah, I think you can." Like literally day 1, I transformed it. Like, I was like, "Okay, I guess it's possible."
And there's also Terror Tide, the Wrath, that's -X, X number of permanents, and then Bringer of the Last Gift, the one I talked about, the 8 mana 6/6. And these are reasons to kind of go into this style of deck, along with things like the Chupacabra Echo or Council of Echoes, Self-Reflection. These are all cards. But then you also look, and these cards mostly have a bad win rate. So I think that this kind of feels a little bit like the blue deck in WoW, where I remember early on, I was like, I like drafting this blue deck, and the win rates were terrible. But then it turned out the blue deck was actually pretty good once people kind of started drafting it and figuring it out, and like the format rotated more to this. I'm not saying this is necessarily going to happen with this deck, but so far I have liked this deck when you kind of get it to line up right.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't be surprised at all if this deck aged well with the format. This to me does seem like the type of deck that if the format as a whole adapts to the very low drop deck, which you can, like you can just start playing 2/2s for 2, or, like in this deck, you could play Shipwreck Sentries, 1 and a blue for 3/3, things that can just really put stop signs out in front of the super low curve deck that can be difficult to get. And, if you want to be a super low curve deck, you can't have a bunch of 5 and 6 drops in your deck. Like you're going to be drawing those late in the game. If the opponent wants to make sure that the game goes to the mid to late game, they can usually put cards in their deck to do so. So if that actually happens, then I think this one could be positioned pretty well, because it actually has some decent tools for that stuff. One of the cards I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned the Sweeper, but given the way that the format's playing out currently, is Malicious Eclipse, that's the 1 black sorcery, all creatures get -2/2 until end of turn. And if a creature an opponent controls would die this turn, you exile it instead. Is that on your radar at all?
Yeah, I think it can be good. I would main deck it in these decks. Like it's so as of now, because you all will play against enough decks where it's good.
Are you playing the 3/3 pirate for 2, the Shipwreck Sentry?
Yeah, I mean any cheap defender is usually pretty good.
Yeah, because these also get milled and count as permanents for your Descend, and they trade off pretty routinely. This is a type of card where if your opponent attacks into it and their creature has 3 or less toughness, you can just go block. I don't care what happens. Like, combat trick. Sure.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Like, you can't. Right. There's nothing you can do that would make me regret this.
I will trade this for literally anything you want to throw at it, have at you. Okay. Yeah, I do think though that I think that this deck is already on the verge of being pretty darn decent. And I do think that we will see not a massive shift, but I think we will see at least a veering away from the super low curve stuff. I think that stuff works really well early in the format, but then I do believe that the format has the ability to adjust to it, where I think that those super low curve decks don't have the ability to adjust themselves. They have to become mid-range decks to adjust. And now you're talking about a whole different thing. So the real question is are those really early cards individually powerful enough to carry it where it just becomes the default, where people are just playing that, kind of from end to end in the format? Or are people taking advantage of the fact that there's a lot of newer players in the queues and there's a lot of people trying out stuff and not really knowing what to do? If we fast forward 2 weeks and we all kind of know, okay, don't do this, but definitely do this, those decks might not be performing quite as well and they might be forced to slow down a little bit. And that can really open things up for decks like this Descend deck, which is already a little bit of a defensively positioned deck that, can take advantage of that type of positioning in the metagame. I did try out the Caves deck a bunch, Luis, or maybe not a bunch, but I tried it like 3 times. I always feel like decks like this that are so clear, like the cards just literally tell you what to do, right? They just say like, play a bunch of caves and you get this stuff, right? And the cards that care about caves say it right on there. There's no fussing around about it. And I feel like these either do well or do poorly. They're very rarely in the middle. And so I thought, you know what, if I open up one of the good cave payoffs, Calamitous Cave-In is kind of the one that comes to mind as the most powerful cave payoff. I thought, well, I'll take it and I'll go for it, because I think a lot of people in the early part of formats are a little reluctant to just dive in head first into like taking caves second and third pick or whatever. But I thought, screw it, I'll do it for science for the listeners, and I have, and the decks have been, I would describe them as very mediocre. They have not been disasters. It's not like I've done them and thought, what am I doing with my life? But even when I thought I had good versions of them, they haven't felt quite like it was the Gates deck, right? The one that we loved with the sweeper and the payoffs and the 8/8 and all that. These decks have not felt like that at all. The payoffs just don't feel the same for some reason. And I wanted to talk about a few of the reasons why that might be the case. One of them is the obvious inherent risk that you take by drafting a deck like this, which is that you need to dedicate picks to cave payoffs and caves kind of above everything. So you need critical mass of caves. And if you see a cave payoff, it's really risky to not take it. You might get it back if you're the only one drafting, other people don't want it. But like, boy, if you don't, it's a disaster, because you really do need both to make the deck work. If you have cave payoffs and no caves, your deck is unplayable. It just doesn't work at all. If you dedicate a bunch of picks to caves, which make your mana clunky or weird, and you have limited payoffs on that, you've just put a big dent in how good your deck is going to end up being. It isn't the same thing as the opposite, where your deck's literally just unplayable, but it is still like, you can't be giving up that pick equity over and over again to not get the payoff. So you are taking on inherent risk once you go into this archetype that it may not be there. Somebody else may decide that they want to try it out, or maybe there's just not that many cave payoffs opened. Basically they're uncommons plus. So if they just don't get opened, even if you were the only cave drafter at the table, you may just not get them. And you bear that burden, where people that are just playing color pairs, sure, they may not have like the absolute best blue-white flying artifact deck, but they still have blue-white cards with flying and artifacts and stuff. It's just, a little bit lesser of a version perhaps, but in this deck, you can miss a lot harder than that. So that's one thing that's just, again, inherent to an archetype like this.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go over the payoffs with you, and because I think there's a question on whether they're good enough. The first one I want to talk about is Calamitous Cave-In, and that's the one that does damage equal to the number of caves to all creatures. Now, this one should be the best payoff, right? This is an effect that you don't normally get at uncommon.
This is the one that looked like the most important to me for a caves deck, because you're just sitting around spinning your wheels, playing tap lands and doing nothing. This is the way that like you get caught up, you punish them for overextending, you end up in a spot where you can all of a sudden like wipe their whole board and easily win from there.
Yeah. And the way that it's played out for me is that does happen some percentage of the time, but then there's been a couple of issues that I faced. One of them is sometimes X equals 3 is not enough. There are, the green deck particularly can put out a bunch of 4 toughness stuff, and you need to kind of really have a draw that gives you, 4 caves on turn 5 or 6 or something. It's a lot to ask. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. Against all of the small decks, against blue-white, you're fine. This thing will sweep the board most of the time. But then I've ran into the other problem, which is it feels like people just have random value laying around the battlefield all the time. Like you wipe the board and they go creature map token and you're like, and crack my map token onto it. And all of a sudden they either got a card out of it or they've got a nice creature to follow up with that didn't, that was just a random common, but all of a sudden it's a 4/4 and you're like, okay, well, that didn't really buy me that much out of the deal because they had this random value. And, things like craft, punish you here as well. Because a lot of times people are playing things in the early game that do affect the board, but aren't necessarily just like power and toughness creatures that you need to get off the board. They're things that leave behind value. And so it does make a sweeper feel like a little bit less potent. And my instinct is that this deck doesn't really have the wiggle room to give up even a little bit of value there. Like each of these things needs to be really good for this to work.
Yeah, I think that you need that. You kind of need everything to work exactly perfectly because I do think that this, for the same reason that removal is not good, that, the sweeper has a little bit of limitations. But even past that, like you also have to have red mana and enough caves. Like you're asking to have red mana, enough caves, and them have a draw that's weak to a sweeper for this all to line up.
Yes.
It's a powerful card, clearly, but it is not.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like the sledgehammer you kind of need it to be.
Yeah.
You need it to just be like, well, this does the thing, every time. Then the other payoffs get worse. That's kind of the problem. Gargantuan Leech, the 5/5 lifelink, that is a 5/5 lifelink for air quotes cheap is exactly what you want out of a clunker deck like this. It's huge. It stabilizes your board. It can turn a game around that you got behind on. But man, it's still, I just never feel like I'm doing something broken with this card. Like I still end up paying 5 for it a lot, or I pay 4 for it, but which is pretty insane. But even then, like I don't do anything else that turn, so the other 3 mana I had kind of went to waste or something like that. Where
it's not the deck that can best use excess mana.
Yeah,
it's not. It can't craft this efficient turn usually.
Right, and even then, the leech, it starts off so expensive at 8 that even if you get it down to 5, it's pretty good. Like 5 mana 5/5 lifelink's a solid card, but it isn't amazing. And I never have, at least thus far, gotten to the point where I'm casting like leeches for 2 or something, where I can play like 2 of them in a turn and it just gets dumb. Sinuous Benthesaur, that's the blue payoff, the one that lets you dig up cards. Good value card, just not that impressive. It's fine. It's a good card. It replaces itself. I have chained Benthesaur into Benthesaur. Like it does things, but it just lacks that punch that you'd hope for all this payoff. And then I haven't actually played Bat Colony yet, which kind of leads me.
I have a rant about Bat Colony.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Bat Colony is a set with Discover and doesn't work if you discover into it. Like, yeah, I get because of the way Discover is worded, you get to put the Bat Colony into your hand. But it doesn't work if you discover into it. If you cast it after discovering into it, then you're in for a bad time because you spent no mana from caves to cast it.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Oh,
that's awkward because, like, look, you're going to have some cards that are bad with your mechanic in the set. But the part I find especially awkward is Caves is the Discover deck. Like, Caves all Discover, or like, most of them Discover, like half or whatever, all the common ones. Mm-hmm. And so have one of the Cave payoffs be bad with Discover is just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, that's a miss. I mean, it does cast it. You do get the static effect. So it's not like a 0, but come on, you want the bats. That's the whole point, right? Yeah, that's bad. Also, so Bat Colony itself is a fine card, but it kind of leads me to the next issue that I have, which is 2 things. One of them is that awkwardly getting my mana lined up has been kind of difficult. There's the cave that filters for color of mana, so that is kind of the savior there, but many of the caves don't, and they just tap for colorless. And so you actually kind of make your mana a little worse by playing a bunch of these caves unless you get the mana fixing one. But even then it's a little bit of a clunker. But the even bigger problem is I still haven't figured out what the best base color pair for the caves deck is, because where I always end up
is there one?
Yeah, I don't know. Because where I always end up is black red, because the things that entice me into the deck are cards like Calamitous Cave-In and then to a lesser extent Gargantuan Leech. And as we've now discovered, I didn't know that until we were doing research for today's show, but black-red's the worst archetype by a fair bit. So maybe that's why I'm missing a bit. But even then, in the perfect world, I don't know what the best color pair base is. You'd think green would be in there because there's like a couple of cards that can help you get more caves onto the battlefield in green. But what's the green cave payoff? Like, is there even one at all? Did I miss it?
Spelunking. You put a cave into play. Your caves all enter untapped, and you gain 4 and put a cave into play and draw a card. Yeah, that card is good.
So there you go. So maybe it's supposed to be red-green, and then I'm supposed to splash for Bat Colony and Gargantuan Leech and Benthesaur?
I don't think caves is supposed to be a specific color. I think it's guided by which of the payoffs you get and which of the cards that you drafted you need to cast early. So if you ended up with a bunch of cheap black interaction, then yeah, you're going to have black as like one of your main colors. But realistically, you're going to be playing like ideally 7, 8, 9 caves in your deck. Yeah. And in that case, like green, I think is often going to be one because it has the stone tree that goes and searches for a cave. The 2 and a green look at the top 6. Mm-hmm. And Spelunking, of course, is uncommon. But really, like if you get a cave-in and a bat cave, then you're going to want to prioritize red and white mana alongside maybe your green. If you have 2 Benthesaurs, well, those are good. I actually think that's like one of the decent payoffs. I've definitely had that card be good both in my deck and against me. But it costs 6 mana. You don't actually need to prioritize blue mana all that much. You eventually will be able to cast it, if you build the mana right. So my problem with caves is that I think it's just kind of what you said. It's slow, it's clunky. You're a lot more dependent on the draft portion of like specific cards being opened and not taken by other people than any of these other than like a normal deck where if like your colors are somewhat open, you'll be fine. You don't need it's not like you need a specific card. Caves is like very hyper specific. I need caves. The deck doesn't function without them. Also doesn't really function without like having 4 or 5 payoffs probably. Like you probably have to have like at least 3 of the uncommon payoffs and probably closer to 5, which at a table where no one's taking any of them, you could get some of the time, but you won't always get even if no one wanted to take them. Exactly. And then at the end of that, you get a deck that is playing some great cards. Like imagine, let's just take as an assumption, you have as many caves as you want and your mana's perfect. Right? Those things aren't true, but let's say they are. Well, Calamitous Cave-In is like 4 mana Wrath of God, and you have Bat Cave, put 3 flyers into play, and then you get a bunch of +1/+1 counters after. Your Benthesaur is a 6 mana 4/4 that draws you 2 of your top 4 or 5 cards, and so on and so forth. That is pretty good, but we're talking the top of the range of the cave decks, and just to put a cap on all of that, you have to kind of play, if not 5 colors, at least 3. And even then, you have to play some colorless caves. Even if you were like a 2-color deck, you'd have to play a bunch of off-color caves or colorless caves. So like add all this together, and it feels like there's too many points of failure for the deck compared to like what you get. I'm not saying it would be never correct. I'm just wondering, like, to use the analogy I always use, if you had to draft the format, if you're going to draft 100 times, how many times should you be caves? If you could know kind of the whole thing and look afterwards, like, you do a deep dive on this draft and look at every single pack and what would have happened. Is there of 100 drafts,
2?
should you be caves twice? Yeah. I was going to say, and that's just not a high bar.
No, it's not. So I'm not going to give up on it fully. I really like when there's an archetype looming around like this that can be picked up every once in a while. So far, it's felt a little too slow, a little too clunky, a little too difficult to get to become a staple archetype, or maybe even one that you want to dip into on the side. Like if you force me to decide right now, I would tell a newer player, just don't do caves. Like for the format. But I'm not, I'm going to keep trying a little bit. I appreciate that they put this type of archetype in, and
totally. I love this type of archetype.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying it's just like completely beyond hope. Both of our experiences drafting this have not been like super positive, and it's the sort of thing that we do enjoy. So if it was good, we want to do it.
Yeah. I mean, again, I want to compare it to the Gates deck, where when that popped off, it was like, oh my God, right? Like you felt like you were doing really, like you would say, you're getting away with something. And it has not felt like that with this one. So we will continue to look at that and hopefully it'll become a thing. There's a few individual cards that we'd like to talk about here as well. One of them that came up is Zoetic Glyph, which it's in the early front runner for Mythic Uncommon for the set. The card has performed insanely well.
It looked absurd, and this format's pretty fast, so it gets even better.
It gets even better. There's always seems to be targets for it. A lot of them have flying, right? And you can go like 2 mana. What's the guy, the artifact that the flyer that taps for artifact mana and then put this on it?
Yeah, the Oaken Siren.
Yeah, Oaken Siren into this is just like stupid. Jay texted me a couple of days ago a picture, and he had 4 Zoetic Glyphs in a deck. And then he sent me the Michael Jordan shrug meme. It's just like, and then he sent me the 17 lands replay of him playing all 4 of them in one game. Like, I mean, it's like he would die and then he would discover into another target and then play another one. And it was just like his opponent actually played really good cards. Like they had a very good deck, and Jay just completely ran him over. But yeah, this thing, we looked it up on 17 lands and it's crushing. Like it's easily the best uncommon currently in the set. So don't sleep on it. It's a little bit of a weird card, right? This type of card isn't the one that you would go, well, yeah, right? Those are always great. Like it's some efficient creature with a bunch of stats. It's hard to kill. No. This is a different type, but it is really well suited to the format, and it has been showing it. The other card, Luis, that's been probably getting the most talk early is Itali's Favor.
Yeah, I mean, this one didn't look particularly great to us in the set review, but as it turns out, the +1/+1 in trample and then just putting more on the board at pretty low cost. This is akin to like putting +1/+1 in trample for 1 mana on a spell if you hit a 2-drop. And if you hit a 3-drop, it's just you're playing with house money. So this card has been good. I've drafted it a bunch, and yeah, it's a good card.
Me too. Yeah. I think a lot of the removal being sorcery speed helps out. I think also the tap out nature of the format in the early stages where you're not really rewarded for leaving up your mana that often. Means that a lot of people are like, I tap, everybody's trying to get on board fast. And this means that you get the green light because, the knock on a card like this is if they kill your creature or bounce it or whatever. But, if everybody's tapping out, you can land this every time. The other thing that happens is that you can favor into favor like that if you get a bunch of these, like you can start chaining them, and it's not like actually that it feels worse than it is when it happens. Like I've had it where my opponent favored into favor and I'm like, oh my God. But then it's like, it's not actually that crazy, for them power level wise, but it feels that way. And it is good value. So people, have been really just jamming basically as many of these as you can get into their deck. The thing that occurred to me, Luis, from game design perspective is the idea that it's one thing to be able to cast something for free, but it's different when you can when you basically get to draw a card and cast it for free at the same time, especially if you can hit a 3-ball where it replaces itself fully. Yeah.
And it also pushes you to play like almost all assertive cards and not much situational stuff, which these decks want to do. It's not a huge cost to them.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to end up being the best red common?
I would struggle to see it being like
is it much better than a Braid?
Than a Braid. The Tomb Raider is currently the most winning common. Not that you should necessarily take it in that order, but I think it's very good, and I think that some decks would rather have this than a Braid. Just removal is just not that good in this format.
No,
like you don't want to be caught with none of it, and a Braid is particularly good because it kills Inverted Iceberg no matter when you draw it, especially at instant speed. Or do the other craft nonsense things, but. I think you just want to be trying to play to the board and force them to deal with your stuff, put them on the back foot more than try to draft the removal-based deck, which is another reason the Caves deck struggles because that's not what that deck does.
Yep. Our boy, Bonehorde Dracosaur, our preview card, currently number 1 card in the set, and that's probably just because we previewed it, right? That's what happens?
Well, it's not because we previewed it. It's because they rightfully gave us the best card in the set preview and will continue to do so going forward.
This is the first time, by the way, that that's ever happened. So we'll take it. It is edging out.
I guess that's true as part of LR, but I did get to preview preview Siege Rhino. Like,
did you get to preview Siege Rhino? Oh
yeah.
my God. Okay, fine. You win that battle. It is currently edging out Aklazats, which is the 4/4 lifelinker that wins the game when it starts attacking. I am curious to see by the end if Bonehorde Drexor is still number one. I would assume that if they were in equal colors, that Aklazats would be slightly better just for its ability to stabilize. But I mean, nobody's really attacking through a 5/5 first striker anyway. We talked about Unlucky Drop and Petrify. Okay, here's a card that is super interesting. It's Sunshot Militia. Where are you at on Sunshot Militia?
So definitely higher than initial. Like, I think the card's actively good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of the best commons. I was pretty high on it after the release day, like the streamer event, because just I ended up having a bunch of decks where it was good. But I still really like it in red-white with Tinker's Tote, or in blue-red if you can make treasures. Frequently, this card will come down and you will just be like, well, I have to kill that thing because I'm dead in 2 to 3 turns without being able to block or stop it if I don't.
Yeah. The first time somebody played it against me, I was like, oh, right. Okay. And because they activated it 3 times the turn they cast it, right? They were ahead in a race. They could afford to take damage, and they tapped, some number of creatures and maps or treasures or whatever. And they're like, you take 3. And I'm like at 9. And I'm like, right. Okay. I'm just going to lose to that in 2 turns unless I find an answer for it. And that's the trick, right? It's just the ability to do between 1 and 4 damage or something without having to attack, per turn. And in these low to the ground decks that red produces, that reach that we call it, the ability to get damage through without attacking, comes in very, very handy. And this one is well suited for that. So yeah, I'm impressed by it too. I agree with you. On initial sight, it was like, holy crap. It is not quite that level, but it is very playable, very solid, and it'll definitely lead to a lot of wins. Go ahead.
I said I did want to talk a little more about Unlucky Drop, but before we move on from cards.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So another thing I want to mention with Unlucky Drop is how it interacts with Discover, more specifically your opponents.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you have Unlucky Drop. If you cast it in response to a Discover, if you cast it on a cheaper card, they can put it on top and Discover into it, but maybe that's not great for them, right? Like they get a choice there, but it's still decent to do it in response. What's the most interesting is if you cast it in response to a Discover on a more expensive card that they won't be able to hit with their Discover number, it doesn't matter where they put it, it's going to the bottom of their deck.
Oh, interesting. So you put it on a 5-drop or whatever, they're discovering 3 and it's gone.
Yep. So that's just something to keep in mind with that. And you can also just cast it in response to like an Inverted Iceberg or any other self-mill card. Well, some of the self-mill cards are optional, like the Death Cap. Inverted Iceberg is not. So, because it's mill 1, it's not a huge drawback.
Right.
So, but even casting in response to an optional one gives them yes, they get the option, but if they don't self-mill, then that's good for you. And if they do, then they milled the thing you unlucky dropped. So just a little thing to think about with timing on the card, because the card is pretty flexible.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. Especially because, like we said, blue's, basically the best color. And this is the kind of bread and butter removal spell that you'll see from it. So that those little tips add up really good. Big picture thoughts. I like the format so far. I tend to like formats that care about the graveyard. I am sort of secretly hoping that we move away from the super, super low to the ground thing. I don't mind if that's a pillar of the format, but I wouldn't mind a little more breathing room for some of the, like Descend. Like Descend deck should work, right? I get it that the Caves deck, that might be too slow, for a normal speed format to work, but I wouldn't mind seeing just a little bit of a shift away where you can't just get away with basically casting all the cheapest possible stuff every time and kind of keep on getting away with it. So that's what I'm hoping to see. And I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. What about you?
Yeah, I think that the 1-drops, especially the flyers, are they lead to kind of non-interactive games. So I don't love that, but I like a lot of what the set's doing. So I've been enjoying it so far. Yeah. I'm going to keep trying to take a crack at Caves and see if maybe there's some sort of configuration that is okay. And I still like Descend, but Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how this plays out. But if the format's fast and has a lot of like cool fiddly interaction things, then I'm fine with it. Like again,
Yeah.
I like Brothers War the whole time, and it was a very fast format. But if the format is just like how many Tomb Raiders and the Miner's Guide Wings can you play, and just run someone over with, that's not an experience I need to have like a ton of time. So
Right.
we'll see. But so far that it hasn't felt like that was too much of the format from my games.
Now, if the listeners are listening to the day that this came out, they can see us put these theories into action tonight, right?
No, you're looking at the chat where you. I forgot that you don't.
No, is it not tonight?
We canceled it.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. What happened?
The Magic Arena challenge bug still is happening. Me and Tupperware
my God. Are you serious?
Me and Tups logged on earlier today and tried to challenge each other, and it just didn't work.
Oh, that's terrible.
Well, I'm
glad I brought this up, but
yeah, I forgot. I didn't mean to tell you, but I had.
No, I know. I just don't have Discord open ever. Like,
yes,
I have to be directed to it basically. But
yeah, I have to send you a telegraph. But
a mule shows up.
This is a good time to say until this challenge budget's fixed, we're just gonna post. We're not doing the showdown anymore. Like our options are to play on Magic Online, which we could do. I wouldn't care too much. The other guys would. Metronome is like not the most excited about it. He's just never played Magic Online.
Yeah, that is a steep.
And honestly, it just feels kind of dumb that we have to do this. So like, I'm just kind of against it. Like, if Arena gets it to the point where Direct Challenge works, then yeah, we'll be glad to run showdowns again. If not, I just don't really have interest in doing that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like that's not on us,
Yeah, no, totally. I did not know that was still going on. I thought that was just a weird one-off.
It's actually apparently been like weeks to months at this point.
Oh man, that's tough.
And
okay, well,
yeah, it's unfortunate. Look, I know the Arena team isn't happy about it either. Of course, if it was easy, they would have, they would have solved it. And like, I've been on that side of things, and like there's sometimes really like pernicious bugs that are really frustrating, and it's impacting the players, and you want to fix it, but you got to have a timeline for all these things. And
yep,
that's all fine. But the fact of the matter is, we're just not going to be able to do the showdown until the program works.
Okay.
And right now it doesn't.
Well, I'm glad I brought it up for personal reasons and so that we could get that message out there, because I'm sure that there's people that are looking forward to it as well. All right, well,
I can just imagine Marshall, like, getting his stream ready, getting his coffee, or, and he's like, all right, guys, when are we drafting? It's like, no, told him.
Yeah, crickets.
Poor guy.
Everybody just sends me a picture of the nice dinner they're out at or their draft that they happen to be in.
We were all going to dinner without you, all five of us.
Yeah. It's a group shot without me just to make me feel bad. Wow, left out. All right. Well, that's good to know. So if they do get it fixed though, we'll announce it on here that, when we'll have it, and of course on Twitter as well. In the meantime, I'm going to take it as an act of cowardice from the Lords of Limited. They found an excuse to not have to play against us. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
That's what it was. We were willing, I got my Magic Online all ready to go. When does Vintage Cube come back, by the way? I'm hankering.
Pretty soon, a couple weeks.
Okay.
I think less, actually. It might be this Wednesday.
Can we put it on another list of things that you need to tell me?
Yeah, I will let you know when the Vintage Cube.
Since I always seem to miss the stupid thing on that too. Okay, well, let's call it a show there. I am curious what everybody who's listening has been experiencing, if it mirrors what we've seen or not. I'm really curious to see how this format changes, because I do think that with 17 lands, people tend to fall very much in line, and then the early data reinforces like, hey, this card's good. So then people, they go, okay, well, that's it. This card's good. And they start drafting the card more. And it leads to opportunities to what happened in the last set with the blue-white deck, where it was like sort of under the radar, and a few of the pros, Carl and those guys that were testing for Worlds are the ones who kind of cracked it and said, well, actually this deck's pretty decent, but you just have to draft it a different way. I feel like, that's the type of thing that people like you and I and our listeners should be looking out for more is, okay, fine, everybody's drafting quick, but can I draft a one step slower deck perhaps? That type of thing. I think that there's some opportunity presented because people tend to fall in line following the online data. And I'm going to be trying to keep my eye open for stuff like that early on here to see if I can get a little ahead of the curve on the metagame. And you should too. And if you find something cool, let us know and we'll talk about it on the podcast as well. If you want to,
there's an arena open end of the month. I think with this, I believe it's the end of this month with Lost Caverns.
Okay, so what you're saying is when I find the hidden archetype, don't say anything, and then after that, we can win the big bucks, and then we'll talk about it. No, we would never do that. We like to share it with our listeners as well, and we would do so. If you want to find us on social media, Marshall_LR and Luis's LSV, you can find everything related to the podcast, including the set reviews, the rare and mythic, and the commons and uncommons are up on lrcast.com or on our YouTube channel. If you want to find our YouTube channel, you can find it on YouTube the normal way, or if you just want the link, it's on the front page of lrcast.com as well. So you can head over there and find all that stuff. I want to thank our patrons once again for supporting us. Thank you so much for your continued support of the show. It means a lot, as well as Ultimate Guard. Thank you so much for your sponsorship of the show. If you have any needs for anything, card protection related, sleeves, deck boxes, big deck boxes, backpacks, any of that type of stuff, make sure your first stop is Ultimate Guard, because they have the best stuff in the business, and we thank them for their sponsorship of the show. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
All right. So I know you don't follow Constructed too much, Marshall, but there is currently a Discover deck, or actually kind of two Discover decks, really, taking over Pioneer right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
So one uses a Quintorius Kind, the Planeswalker, who's 5 mana, 4 loyalty. Whenever you play a spell from exile, he drains the opponent for 2. And has -3 Discover 4. So what you do with this is you play one, you discover 4. Your deck has no cards that cost less than 5, except clones like Clever Impersonator and Spark Double.
Oh, ones that can copy Planeswalkers?
So then you copy the Planeswalker, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then each one, and then Spark Double, because it doesn't abide by the legendary rule. Once you have like 3 Spark Doubles in play and you're discovering, you're draining them for 6, right? So you pretty much kill them when this happens.
Okay.
And then the other deck, which is very similar, uses a Trumpeting Carnosaur. So that's the 6 mana 7/6 Discover. And when it comes into play, you discover and you make sure that everything you hit is actually also a clone. So they all clone the Carnosaur. You have Geological Appraiser, which hits Glasspool Mimic. You have Eldritch Evolution, which you then sack the Appraiser to go get another Carnosaur. And you just get a million Carnosaurs in play, and then you get Doomscar Titan into play from Kaldheim, the 6 mana 4/4 that gives all your creatures +1/+0 and haste.
And you just one shot them.
And you just one shot them. So both of these decks have a similar quality, which is when you put the Discover ability on the stack, it is deterministic that it's going to hit a way to keep doing that. Like it's not, it's not a mystery. And likewise, if you play Rhinos in Modern, when you cast Violent Outburst and you Cascade, and I'm going to use Cascade and Discover interchangeably here, you always hit Crashing Rhinos,
right?
Because you built your deck such that you have no other cards that are cheaper. That's fine, but I think that there's a kind of a rules change that could be made here that would actually be better for Magic. Ooh. And what that is the way these split cards work. So Rhinos can play Bone Crusher Giant and Brazen Borrower because those are counted as 5 mana spells, so you don't cascade into them. Likewise, the Pioneer decks play all sorts of weird stuff. They play Bedeck Bedazzle, that's the red 2 red-black hybrid mana to give a creature +3/-3. And like a 6 mana destroy something like a destroy it on basic land or whatever.
Okay.
But it's basically a 2 mana removal spell that has a total cost of 8, so you don't ever cascade into it or like connive, concoct and stuff like that.
And you're able to build a functional deck with cheaper cards that just aren't technically cheaper.
Right. And the not technically cheaper part that I kind of have an issue with, the rules don't have to work this way. Well, why do they? I mean, they've been decided to work this way, but the rules of Magic aren't like the rules of physics. Like, I have to obey the law of gravity. It's the law, Like I can't change that. Magic doesn't have to be fundamentally a certain way. Wizards ultimately, and the rules manager, they R&D, whatever, they control what the rules are. Obviously, like people can then choose to play or not play with those rules, but in general, we've kind of all bought into we'll play with the rules they give us, right? And I don't see why and I'm sure people will tell me, but I don't see why it has to be the way where Brazen Borrower doesn't get hit by a Cascade that's looking for a 2-mana spell. I think that what you could do is make it so it stops at Brazen Borrower, and you can cast Petty Theft. You can't cast the Brazen Borrower version. This is like the thing with a Valky, right, where people would cascade into Valky.
Yeah.
And they changed the way the rule worked for that, where you can't do that.
Oh, okay. They should do that.
Well, they changed it so Valky is just too expensive now.
Yeah, they should do the reverse of that.
But I think having it be that if you cascade into that, you can just cast the cheap part. I don't think that breaks, at least not in my initial thoughts of it on it. And I think that makes sense because it's either way, like it's just kind of rulesy nonsense to say, well, it has to work this way, or this is a total converted mana cost. That's why it does that. And it's like, sure, I understand why that is, but I think that the format would be better if it didn't work that way. Because I think Cascade and Discover are fun spin the wheel mechanics in theory. In practice, they're not. Like the way Discover plays in Limited is pretty cool, right?
Yeah. You
cast a card and you just see what you get and you hope for something good. And it's a very wide range of things. And the way Bloodbraid Elf played back when it was printed in the Jund decks, you'd cast it and you'd hope to cascade into Blightning sometimes or Terminate other times. Sometimes cascading into Putrid Leech was actually what you wanted to do. Like you would just cast one of your spells and it would be good. The way the Rhinos decks works or these Pioneer or Discover decks work, it's just deterministic. It's just a demonic tutor. There's no wonder here. You're casting the spell and you built your deck so you always have the same thing happen. I don't think that's particularly fun, and it just feels like we're letting them get away with nonsense by putting 2-mana interactive spells in their deck that are secretly 5 mana.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I feel like
intuitively it doesn't. Like if you hit Bob and you revealed Valky or something, like I don't know, what would most players say you should take there?
Yeah, I mean, we know now that the answer is 9, but I think that you could slice it and dice it however you want, but this doesn't really pass the smell test for me. And right now, these formats I think are being negatively impacted by the fact that you are able to do this, especially as card pools get bigger and they just make double face cards in like every set now. Basically, you just end up with all these cards that just cost a lot more mana than they kind of actually cost, and that I don't think is the most fun or intuitive way to go out. So I don't know. I thought it's worth bringing up, even though I don't think it's very likely to change.